They say airports are where new journeys begin. But for Ebony Caldwell, it was the start of an unthinkable battle, trapped between towering luggage carts and frustrated travelers at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta. International Airport, she never expected that a single insult calling her too loud would catapult her into a whirl of betrayal, secrets, and shocking revelations. From the moment an arrogant staffer tried to silence her, Ebony's life twisted into a path where fiery determination clashed with hidden corporate greed. What no one realized was that this so-called loud black girl was about to stake her claim in the airport literally. Ebony Caldwell inhaled deeply as she stepped out of the taxi at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of the sprawling building, and she could feel her heart pounding with excitement and a flicker of anxiety. Her flight was scheduled for noon, but Ebony had decided to arrive extra early. She was traveling for a crucial business meeting in Los Angeles, a meeting that could potentially change the course of her life. For Ebony, every step in this trip mattered. She was a self-made entrepreneur, known in close circles for her cutting-edge social media consulting firm, Caldwell Creative. Ebony had started the company in her small apartment in downtown Atlanta, gradually expanding its influence through a series of well-executed deals and partnerships. Now she was finalizing a contract with a major movie studio in Hollywood, a dream project that would push her company into an entirely new stratosphere. She could hardly contain her excitement. Dragging her violet carry-on bag, Ebony walked through the automatic doors into the atrium of the main terminal. The day was busy with families bustling by, business travelers rushing to gates, and lines forming at security checkpoints. She typically traveled so frequently that airports were like second nature to her. Yet this morning, a tingle of anticipation ran down her spine. She had been briefed that someone from a potential investor group might also be on her flight. It was all hush-hush, but Ebony's contact insisted that she keep an eye out for a certain Mr. Johnson, who was said to be on the same route to Los Angeles. Standing in line at the check-in counter for Delta Airlines, Ebony reviewed her mental checklist. 1 business proposals organized, check. 2 presentation slides loaded on her tablet, check. 3 additional notes and scripts, check. 4 confidence, definitely. However, as she neared the front of the line, Ebony noticed tension simmering behind the counter. A staff member with a tight bun, sharp green eyes, and a stiff posture was speaking in hushed, urgent tones. With her colleague, people in line shuffled uncomfortably. Ebony glimpsed a mother trying to calm a crying toddler. A pair of elderly travelers who appeared confused by the kiosk instructions, and a man wearing a pilot's uniform who looked exasperated by the delay. Something was off. Finally, Ebony reached the check-in desk. She offered a warm smile. "Good morning," she said, sliding her passport and itinerary across the counter. The staffer barely made eye contact. "Name Ebony Caldwell," she replied brightly. The woman tapped at her keyboard. "Final destination. Los Angeles, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Carry on only." The staffer asked, "Just this one?" Ebony said, placing her small suitcase on the scale, even though it was technically within the carry-on size. "You may proceed," the woman said, curtly, handing back Ebony's documents. Ebony was used to professional, albeit sometimes curt, interactions at airports. But there was something about this particular staffer's manner, an impatience tinged with disdain. She chose not to let it bother her. She had bigger things on her mind. The real trouble began when Ebony headed to the security checkpoint. A large digital sign announced extensive renovations and lane closures. Lines were choked with impatient travelers, and Ebony could see TSA officers hurriedly directing people to different lines to balance the load. Ebony joined what looked like the shortest line, only to realize it was barely moving. "Excuse me, ma'am. We're redirecting travelers to the next line for faster service," a young TSA agent called to Ebony. He appeared polite, but he was clearly frazzled by the chaos. Ebony nodded and followed his instructions, or she ended up in a lane that snaked around a corner, crowded with strollers, beeping electronics, and fussy children. A few people ahead of her, she saw the same staffer from the check-in counter. The woman had stepped away from the desk, for some reason, and was aggressively waving at one of her co-workers. "Something's definitely going on here," Ebony mumbled to herself. But again, she chose to stay calm, listening to a motivational track on her phone. As the line creeped forward, Ebony decided to call her mother to kill time. She chatted in her usual lively tone, animatedly describing the upcoming meeting, her new marketing strategies, and her excitement about the potential investor. She was in the middle of excitedly telling her mum about the big Hollywood studio when she felt a sharp tap on her shoulder. She turned to see the staffer glaring at her. "You need to keep it down." The woman hissed. "You're disturbing everyone?" Ebony was taken aback. "I'm sorry, I'm just on the phone, speaking at a normal volume. I don't think I'm disturbing anyone." The woman pursed her lips. "You're very loud. Miss, I've received multiple complaints." Ebony glanced at the people around her. Most were either looking at their phones, dealing with their children, or wearing headphones. Nobody seemed to be paying Ebony any mind at all. "I haven't seen anyone complaining," she said, trying to keep a polite tone. "Look," the staffer said, voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe you people are used to shouting, but this is an airport. I'm going to have to ask you to keep it down or end your call." Ebony's heart thumped hard in her chest. "You people," the phrase rang in her ears. She could sense the underlying implication. Blood rushed to her face, but she resolved not to give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "I'm speaking at a normal volume." "Ma'am," Ebony said firmly, "you may think I'm loud, but from the looks of it, no one else here has an issue." The staffer rolled her eyes dramatically. "Fine, suit yourself. But if I hear one more complaint about you, we will escalate this matter. We take passenger comfort very seriously." And just like that, the woman stormed off, leaving Ebony to stare, half stunned, half furious at her retreating form. People nearby who had overheard the exchange gave Ebony sympathetic glances. One older gentleman stepped forward and whispered, "Don't let her get to you. Not worth it." Ebony thanked him with a tight nod, then turned back to face the front of the line. She ended her call with her mother, though she assured her mum everything was fine, not wanting to worry her. But inside, Ebony felt an anger rising. She'd worked too long and too hard to let condescending remarks derail her. She told herself to remain calm, get through security, and focus on the reason she was here. Nothing was going to distract her from that Hollywood meeting. Little did she know this incident was only the tiny snowball that would trigger an avalanche of drama, unraveling secrets, hidden betrayals, and shocking revelations, ultimately leading Ebony Caldwell to a place of unexpected power ownership of the entire terminal. Clearing security took another half hour. Ebony repacked her laptop, tablet, and shoes, quickly resisting the urge to glance over her shoulder, worried that the staffer or someone else might appear to harass her again. She figured it was best to keep her head down and move on. Yet, as she reached concourse, Ebony's phone buzzed. A text from her friend and assistant Monique lit up the screen. "Monique, heard you're traveling today. Be careful. I read online. There's some big protest going on at the airport. Something about discriminatory practices by staff. Not sure which airline. Just watch out." Ebony raised an eyebrow, her mind returning to that staffer's attitude, discriminatory practices. This had to be more than a coincidence. She typed back, "Ebony, Just had a weird run-in with a rude staffer. She basically told me to stop shouting. Real nasty. I'll keep my eyes open. Thanks for the heads up. Stuffing her phone in her jacket pocket. Ebony tried to brush the incident aside. She had a flight to catch, and a critical meeting in L.A. Her gate, A17, was on the far end of the concourse. As she made her way there, Ebony became aware of a certain tension in the air. She noticed a group of employees standing in a huddle, whispering furiously. Their uniforms bore the airport's insignia, not specific to any airline. Occasionally, they cast glances around as though expecting trouble. A large overhead screen announced flight statuses. Next to Ebony's flight, she read, "On time, good." With more than an hour left before boarding, Ebony decided to grab a coffee. She headed to a familiar Starbucks in the concourse, one she always visited during her travels. While waiting in line at Starbucks, Ebony felt a tap on her shoulder again. She spun around, half expecting to find that same staffer. Instead, she saw a bright-faced woman wearing a badge that read, Customer Experience Supervisor. "Hi, I'm Aisha," the woman said softly. "I'm with the airport's customer experience team. Do you have a moment to chat about your experience this morning?" Ebony eyed her suspiciously. "Is this about that staffer who approached me in the security line?" Aisha smiled sympathetically. "Yes, partly. Also, we've had a few ongoing concerns regarding staff behavior. I noticed you earlier. If you're willing, I'd appreciate some quick feedback." Ebony hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, I've got a few minutes before my flight. Let me get my coffee and we can talk." Aisha nodded gratefully. Once Ebony had her latte in hand, they moved to a small table near the window. The aroma of coffee swirled around them, a momentary comfort against the tension in the air. Aisha pulled out a small notepad. "Could you describe in your own words what happened this morning?" Ebony recounted the conversation, checking in at the desk, seeing the staffer's tense demeanor. Then the confrontation in the security line, where she was labeled too loud. She watched as Aisha's expression shifted from professional curiosity to thinly veiled concern. "That's unacceptable," Aisha said. Once Ebony finished, "I'm sorry you had to experience that." Did she say anything else that might suggest discriminatory behavior? Ebony looked at the swirl of coffee in her cup. She used the phrase, "you people." Not to be overly sensitive, but, well, that felt pointed. Aisha let out a low sigh. "We've had multiple complaints about her. Let's just say, you're not the first to describe that kind of behavior." She scribbled more notes. "Do you happen to remember her name, or see her name tag?" Ebony shook her head. "I didn't catch it." She was wearing a Delta staffer uniform, though, and was manning the check-in desk. Aisha frowned. "That's odd. She's not on Delta's official roster. She's actually an airport contractor who temporarily fills airline staffing gaps. She's supposed to be an all-airlines floater, but there have been some disciplinary issues." Ebony suppressed a laugh. Disciplinary issues, indeed. That's putting it lightly. They chatted a bit longer, and Ebony learned about an undercurrent of tension at Hartsfield-Jackson staffers, complaining about poor working conditions, management crackdowns on unprofessional conduct, and a swirl of rumors about secret layoffs. Aisha looked exhausted, as though juggling far too many crises at once. "Thank you for your time," Aisha said, as she stood to leave. "We're trying to address these issues internally, but I will say, it's a heavier problem than most passengers realize." "Thanks for listening," Ebony replied, genuinely appreciating the empathy. "I hope things improve soon for everyone's sake." Aisha gave a little nod and disappeared into the crowd. Ebony sipped the remainder of her coffee, replaying the morning's events in her mind. She couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Discrimination in public spaces, especially an airport that prided itself on being a global hub, was appalling. Still, Ebony reminded herself that her main priority was the all-A meeting. She couldn't afford distractions, but fate had other plans. Or perhaps it was karma, weaving a tapestry she couldn't yet foresee. Because Ebony Caldwell was not just any passenger who would fade into the crowd. Forces were aligning behind the scenes, and Ebony unknowingly was at the center of the storm. An hour later, Ebony was seated at Gate A17 laptop, open on her knees as she typed final notes for her business pitch. The gate area was crowded. Flights to various destinations departed from neighboring gates, so passengers often milled around. She kept glancing at the boarding time on the overhead screen, only 15 minutes left before her flight was supposed to start boarding. A sudden crackle of the PA system made Ebony look up. "Attention passengers on Flight 437 to Los Angeles," a voice droned. "We regret to inform you that your flight has been delayed due to an unexpected maintenance issue. The new estimated departure is 1:30 p.m. Please remain in the gate area for further updates." A collective groan rippled through the travelers. Ebony exhaled sharply. Another hour-and-a-half delay that cut her travel buffer dangerously short. She pulled up her phone to see if she could catch a later meeting time in L.A. Already drafting a text to her business contact. But before she could finalize her message, she saw the staffer again. The same woman with the green eyes, walking briskly toward the gate counter. She was chatting with two men in suits who looked like mid-level managers, possibly from the airport authority. Ebony could almost feel the tension from across the room. The staffer's face was taut. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Trying to keep her distance, Ebony casually walked closer, pretending to be on her phone while eavesdropping on their conversation. Her gut told her something was amiss. "We can't have a repeat of last week." One of the men hissed under his breath. "Look!" The staffer snapped. "I did what I was told. I'm not taking the blame for any of this." "You're on thin ice," the other man said, his voice laced with warning. "Just keep your head down until the investors finalize their decisions." Investors. Ebony thought. Her ears perked up, remembering that she was supposed to keep an eye out for a potential investor. Mr. Johnson, who might be on this flight. Were these men talking about the same group? The staffer rolled her eyes. "I don't even know who they are." I keep hearing about these VIPs, but for all I know, it's just a rumor. Meanwhile, I'm stuck dealing with." She shot a glance around, as if searching for Ebony Loud. "Passengers." She finished acidly. One of the men sighed. "If these expansions go through, this terminal might be under new management anyway. So let's try to make it until the end of the month without a fiasco." Ebony's mind raced. New management. Expansions. Investors. Something bigger was happening behind the scenes. She wondered if the delayed flight was part of the fiasco they wanted to avoid. Maybe technical issues were real, but Ebony suspected a deeper story. As Ebony tried to piece the puzzle together, her phone buzzed again, with an unknown number. "Hello," she answered softly. "Is this Ebony Caldwell?" A deep male voice asked. "Yes, speaking. Good afternoon. Miss Caldwell, this is James Watson, an associate of Mr. Terence Johnson. We understand you may be on the same flight to Los Angeles. Mr. Johnson was hoping to have a brief conversation with you in the lounge area. If you have the time." Ebony's heart jumped. "Of course. Where should I meet him?" "We're in the VIP lounge near Gate A4. We can have you escorted, if that's easier." Ebony looked around. Gate A4 was a fair walk, but not impossible. No need. I can make it there myself. Thank you. She ended the call quickly, gathered her bag and laptop and strode off. Her mind buzzed with excitement. Terence Johnson was rumored to be one of the biggest private investors in entertainment and new media. If he was interested in Ebony's company, that could be a life-changing partnership. But Ebony had only just stepped away from her gate when she felt a hand clamp on her shoulder. She spun around to find none other than the staffer glaring at her. "You're on flight 437, right?" the staffer asked curtly. Ebony forced a polite tone. "Yes, but it's delayed, so I'm heading to the lounge." A flicker of disdain crossed the staffer's face. "You're not authorized to be in the VIP lounge, ma'am. That's for premium passengers and special guests only. I can't have you wandering around if you don't have the proper access." Ebony felt anger flare in her chest. "I've been invited," she said coolly. "I have an appointment with someone who's currently there." The staffer seemed momentarily taken aback. She narrowed her eyes. "Well, if you think that Ebony didn't let her finish, I don't think I know." She stepped back, freeing her shoulder from the staffer's grip. "Now, excuse me, I have somewhere to be." Without waiting for a response, Ebony pivoted on her heel and marched away. Adrenaline raced through her veins. She'd never been one to make a scene in public, but this woman was pushing her limits. Ebony vowed to file a formal complaint once her business was done. The VIP lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson was a spacious haven removed from the chaos of the concourse. Ebony checked in at the reception desk, gave her name, and was swiftly escorted to a private seating area. There she found a tall, distinguished man in his mid-50s, wearing a tailored grey suit and expensive loafers. His salt and pepper hair gave him an air of gravitas, Mr. Johnson. Ebony ventured, extending her hand. He looked up from a series of documents. A warm smile spread across his face. "Ebony Caldwell, I've been looking forward to meeting you." She took a seat across from him, placing her bag on the floor. Another man, presumably. James Watson hovered nearby. Johnson nodded to him, and James discreetly moved to another corner of the lounge, granting them privacy. "I've heard excellent things about Caldwell Creative." Johnson began setting aside his papers. "A few of my associates in Los Angeles speak highly of your work in social media consulting and influencer engagement. I'm honored." Sir Ebony replied, "I've admired your investments in the entertainment industry for years." Johnson gave her a measured look. "I'm also aware that you're working on a pitch for a major studio in Hollywood. Would that be paramount?" By any chance, Ebony's eyes widened slightly. She'd signed a confidentiality agreement, not to reveal her potential client's name in casual conversation. She chose her words carefully. "I can't confirm the studio's identity just yet, but we are in final negotiations with a major player." Johnson nodded, seeming to respect her discretion. "I won't pry further. However, I do want to discuss the possibility of investing in Caldwell Creative. The entertainment sector is evolving rapidly, and digital outreach is crucial. My team believes your agency could be an excellent partner in several upcoming projects." Ebony's heart soared. This was exactly the opportunity she'd hoped for. They spent the next 40 minutes discussing market trends, Ebony's growth strategy, and how Johnson envisioned a collaboration. Despite the lounge's calm atmosphere, Ebony felt the electricity of a game-changing conversation crackle in the air. Midway through the meeting, Ebony's phone vibrated with a new flight update. "Your flight now departs at 2:00 p.m., moi." She stifled a groan, another pushback. She didn't want to be in Atlanta all day, but at least it gave her more time to talk with Johnson. Eventually, Johnson clasped his hands together. "I think we're on the same page, Ms. Caldwell. I'd like to set up a more formal meeting once we're in Los Angeles, assuming we ever get there. He glanced at the updated boarding time on his phone and chuckled. In the meantime, I have a proposition. My group is looking to expand into new revenue streams. Did you know the airport is actually going through a major reorganization? Ebony leaned forward. I heard whispers about expansions and new management. Indeed. Johnson said, "We've been approached to invest in Terminal A's renovation project. It's a huge opportunity, though, rife with issues, poor management staff, complaints, potential lawsuits around discriminatory practices, you name it. But if done right, it could turn Terminal A into a state-of-the-art hub. My question for you, are you open to branching out of pure social media consulting and taking a stake in something bigger, like a corporate synergy project that touches on travel media branding, and more?" Ebony's mind whirled. This was a pivot from anything she'd ever done. But the prospect of diversifying her portfolio was thrilling. She recalled how the staffer singled her out, calling her too loud. The irony that she might now have an opportunity to shape how the very terminal was run was not lost on her. "I'm definitely open to discussing it further," Ebony said, voice unwavering. "What do you have in mind?" Johnson smiled. "Let's say we might want you as a partner in the terminal's branding, making it a hub for digital innovation. There would be a seat at the table for you when we finalize terms with the city and the airport authority. We can talk in detail once we're in L." "But I wanted to gauge your interest." Ebony's head was spinning with possibilities. "I'm all ears, Mr. Johnson." They shook hands, sealing a preliminary understanding that Ebony Caldwell was now on the short list of potential investors and strategic partners for Terminal A's overhaul. The potential synergy with her media expertise was undeniable. As Ebony left the lounge, her heart felt like it was on fire with excitement. She pictured that staffer's sneer, her condescending words, "you people," and realized with a small smirk that life had a funny way of flipping the script. Little did she know just how big that flip would be, or how messy the fallout would become when others caught wind of Ebony's rising power. When Ebony returned to Gate A17, the area was even more crowded and tense. The flight delay had extended further. The departure was now set for 2:30 p.m., and frustration was boiling over. Families fumed, business travelers checked their watches incessantly, and announcements crackled with half-apologies. Ebony settled into a corner seat, hoping to avoid any further encounters with that troublesome staffer. But no such luck. Within minutes, a commotion erupted near the gate counter. Ebony spotted the staffer standing behind it, microphone in hand, issuing an announcement. "For Flight 437 to Los Angeles, we have a further delay. The plane is undergoing a mechanical check for safety purposes." Passengers booed and jeered. The staffer's face hardened. "I understand everyone's frustration, but yelling and complaining won't solve anything." One passenger, a middle-aged man in a crumpled suit, shouted, "This is ridiculous. We've been waiting for hours. Are we even getting on this flight today?" The staffer scowled. "As I said, it's a mechanical issue. We can't compromise on safety." A woman chimed in. "Then at least give us meal vouchers." In the midst of this, Ebony's phone rang again. This time, it was the corporate office of Caldwell Creative. A fresh wave of tension hit her. She needed to finalize details with her team, but she couldn't hear a thing in this uproar. Trying to find a quieter spot, Ebony moved away, only to catch the staffer's glare again. She was gripping the microphone, scanning the crowd. "Don't say I didn't warn you," Ebony heard her mutter under her breath. Then, to Ebony's shock, the staffer's voice came over the PA once more. "We have a passenger named Ebony Caldwell. Please step forward." All eyes turned to Ebony. Her stomach churned, unsure of what was happening. She carefully walked up to the counter. The staffer smirked. "Ms. Caldwell, I need to speak with you about a reported disturbance. Please follow me." Ebony's mind reeled. "Disturbance? I haven't done anything." The staffer nodded with mock seriousness. "I've received multiple complaints that you were causing a scene in the lounge area. We need to address this." Gasps and murmurs spread through the gate area. Ebony felt the heat of many eyes upon her. She glanced around, trying to spot Aisha from customer experience or anyone who might advocate for her. She didn't see anyone. Ebony took a breath, her heart pounding. She knew this was some twisted power play, perhaps an attempt to deflect from the staffer's own issues. "I was invited to the VIP lounge." Ebony said, voice trembling with controlled anger. "You have no grounds." The staffer's eyes lit with a predatory gleam. "So you were in the lounge? Then you admit you were in an area you're not authorized to be in." "I was invited," Ebony repeated through gritted teeth, "by Terence Johnson, an investor in the terminal. If you want, we can go ask him together." The staffer's smirk faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I'm sure Mr. Johnson would love to discuss your presence there. But right now, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass. And ID Security has asked me to collect some information." The mention of security sent alarm bells ringing in Ebony's mind. She wasn't sure if this woman could actually summon security for such a weak reason. But Ebony knew enough to proceed cautiously. The staffer was creating a spectacle to humiliate her in front of other passengers. Ebony suspected it was partly racially motivated, partly a personal vendetta. Summoning her calm, Ebony handed over her boarding pass. "My ID is not leaving my possession," she said, firmly refusing to relinquish it. "If security has questions, they can ask me themselves." The staffer made a point of studying the boarding pass, as if searching for anything incriminating. "Very well," she said, her voice dripping with false courtesy. "Take a seat, Miss Caldwell, until security arrives." The staffer turned off the microphone, and Ebony realized the gate area was dead silent. Everyone watched this drama unfold. Ebony felt her cheeks burning. She wanted to scream at the injustice, but she sensed the staffer was baiting her, hoping she would blow up and confirm the negative stereotype she was trying to pin on her. Ebony refused to play that game. Instead, she quietly stepped aside and waited. A few minutes later, 2 airport security officers approached. Ebony recognized them as standard airport police. Not TSA-1 had a thick mustache and kind eyes. The other was younger, with a stern jawline. They asked Ebony to step into a more private area, away from the prying eyes of the crowd. "What's going on, ma'am?" the older officer asked, once they were in a small corridor. Ebony recounted everything: the staffer's initial confrontation in the security line, her insulting remarks, and now this baseless accusation of a disturbance. The younger officer glanced at the older one. "We've been getting calls about that staffer all day," he murmured. "Something's off." They took Ebony's statement and thanked her for her cooperation. Then the older officer said gently, "We're going to talk to her, for now. Just return to the gate and wait. You're not in any trouble, miss." Caldwell Ebony breathed a small sigh of relief. As she returned to the gate, the staffer shot her a glare. Ebony ignored it, finding a seat in the far corner. The flight was delayed again, now scheduled for 3:00 p.m. Ebony attempted to stay calm, double-checking emails from her team, ensuring that her LA contacts knew about the delay. But her mind kept drifting to the staffer, the looming confusion about the terminal expansion, and how everything seemed interconnected. She recalled Terence Johnson's words. "There would be a seat at the table for you." Ebony wondered if fate was thrusting her into the very heart of the airport's problems, so she could later help solve them. For now, she just wanted to get on the plane and get to Los Angeles. Little did she know that the real storm was about to break, and the consequences would be more severe than a delayed flight. By the time the flight was finally cleared to board at 3:15 p.m., passengers were nearly at their wits' end. Ebony stood near the priority boarding lane, quietly hoping to spot Mr. Johnson, so she could at least confirm they were on the same flight and reassure him that everything was fine. But as the line slowly moved, there was no sign of him or his associate James. Perhaps they were in a different boarding group or had changed flights altogether. Just as Ebony handed her boarding pass to the agent at the door, the staffer approached, stepping behind the agent and whispering something into her ear. The agent looked confused, then nodded. She scanned Ebony's pass with a slight frown. Ebony expected the worst. Maybe the staffer had stooped to some petty measure to block her from boarding, but the beep sounded normally, and Ebony was cleared to enter the jetway. She let out the breath she'd been holding. After finding her seat, 13A, a window seat, Ebony settled in. She pulled out her laptop, planning to use the flight to refine her pitch. She also typed up a scathing complaint in her notes app, determined to send it to the airport authority. The moment she landed, passengers trickled on board, stowing their carry-ons, jockeying for overhead bin space. Ebony kept an eye on each person boarding. When a petite woman with a baby, squeezed by Ebony, offered to help lift her bag, an elderly man across the aisle gave Ebony a nod of thanks, recognizing her gesture. So much negativity in the terminal. Ebony thought, but I won't let that define me. The plane door finally closed around 3:05 p.m. Ebony felt relief wash over her. She texted Monique a quick update that she was en route and turned her phone to airplane mode. But as the safety demonstration began, Ebony noticed an empty seat across the aisle in the same row. Could it be that Mr. Johnson didn't make the flight? Her stomach sank. Maybe his private jet was an option. If the commercial flight fell through, I hope it doesn't affect our potential deal. She worried. The engine roared and the plane began taxiing, but then it stopped. Minutes ticked by. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to hold briefly due to congestion on the runway. We'll have an update soon. Ebony sighed. Let's just take off already. But the plane didn't move. After another 10 minutes, the pilot came on again. We apologize for the delay. Please remain seated. Finally, the plane began to move again, rolling slowly toward the runway. Ebony glanced out the window, spotting the terminal building receding in the distance. She thought back to the staffer's hateful glare, the cryptic warnings from airport authority, the conversation with Terence Johnson about terminal ownership. She had a wild, fleeting thought. What if one day I run that place and fix all this nonsense? Little did she know how prophetic that thought would be. At long last, the plane lifted off the ground, an exhilarating moment when Ebony felt like she was leaving the day's troubles behind. But the drama was far from over. It was merely crossing state lines. Several hours later, Ebony felt the plane begin its descent into Los Angeles. She'd spent most of the flight alternating between business tasks and thinking about the day's bizarre incidents. The seatbelt sign dinged on, flight attendants did their final checks, and Ebony braced for the typical jostling on approach. Suddenly, the plane lurched violently. A wave of gasps filled the cabin. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Ebony gripped her armrests as the plane shook. Her heart pounded. She tried to breathe through the moment, focusing on the fact that turbulence is common and usually not dangerous. Still, the rattling was intense enough that she spotted a flight attendant gripping a seat back for support. Then, just as swiftly, the shaking subsided. The pilot spoke again, calmer this time. "Apologies for that bump, folks. We're past the worst of it. We should be landing soon." A collective sigh of relief spread through the cabin. Ebony closed her eyes. "This day needs to end. I just want to land safely, finalize my pitch, and hopefully salvage this trip." A wave of exhaustion washed over her as the plane touched down at LAX Ebony felt a surge of gratitude. She powered her phone back on, ignoring the flood of messages and focusing on any urgent items. One text from Monique read, "I just got wind from a journalist friend. That staffer who harassed you. Rumor is she's at the center of a discrimination lawsuit. The airport's contractor staff has a track record of picking on black and brown passengers. Some big scandal might break soon. Might want to talk to a lawyer." Ebony felt a spike of anger, but also a sense of vindication. It wasn't just me, she thought. This is a pattern. She typed back, "Ebony, thanks for the heads up. I'll look into it." Gathering her belongings. Ebony stepped off the plane, the California sunshine filtering through the windows. The smell of coffee and engine fuel was different here. People rushed off to baggage claim, loved ones reunited, and Ebony found herself navigating the hustle of LAX, her mind only half present. She needed a plan. Once she retrieved her luggage from the overhead, Ebony headed straight for a black sedan, waiting to take her to her hotel. The driver, a friendly older man named Carlos, greeted her warmly. "Welcome to LA," he said with a smile, noticing her tired expression. "Long flight." "You have no idea," Ebony replied with a half laugh. She sank into the back seat and closed her eyes for a moment as the car merged into traffic. Her phone rang, an LA number she didn't recognize. "Hello, Ms. Caldwell. This is Nancy Greenwood from Paramount. I just wanted to confirm your meeting time tomorrow morning. Are you still good for 10 sudden a.m.? Ebony sat upright. "Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it," she said, trying to sound energetic. "Excellent." "See you then," Nancy replied, clicking off Ebony. Texted Monique, "Confirmed, meeting at 10 a.m. tomorrow with the studio. Let's finalize the pitch deck tonight." Traffic crawled, but eventually Ebony reached her hotel in West Hollywood. After checking in, she connected with Monique via video call, hashing out last-minute details. Midnight crept up on her, and Ebony's mind blurred with data points, statistics, creative proposals. Before calling it a night, Ebony checked her phone one last time. A new email popped up, subject line, "Urgent Terminal, a investment, Terrence Johnson." She opened it, her eyes scanning quickly. Mrs. Caldwell. We've learned of some complications at Hartsfield-Jackson earlier today, including potential staff misconduct. This may impact our negotiations for Terminal A's expansion. Johnson requests an urgent follow-up meeting to discuss next steps tomorrow evening if possible. Please confirm your availability. James Watson. Ebony's pulse quickened. She realized her personal ordeal with the staffer might now tie directly into whether Johnson's group and possibly Ebony would invest in Terminal A. Could the entire deal be at risk because of one hateful employee? She typed a reply, confirming she could meet in the evening after her studio meeting. Then she fell into bed, exhaustion overwhelming her. But her dreams were a tangle of confrontation with the staffer, swirling lawsuits and runways crumbling underfoot. Morning brought fresh energy. Ebony's meeting at Paramount, indeed. It was Paramount, as Johnson had guessed, went better than expected. She delivered her pitch with confidence, showcasing how Caldwell Creative could revolutionize the studio's social media approach. The executives seemed impressed, culminating in an informal promise to finalize the deal by the end of the week. High on success. Ebony sat in a nearby cafe, sipping a celebratory latte. She texted Monique the good news. Ebony meeting was amazing. They're basically in fingers crossed for the final contract. Monique, that's incredible. So proud of you. But brace yourself. My journalist friend says the scandal at Hartsfield is about to blow up. Ebony took a deep breath, reflecting on how her personal triumph contrasted sharply with the chaos brewing back in Atlanta. She typed back, "Ebony, I'll keep an eye on it. Meeting with Terence Johnson tonight." Once Ebony returned to her hotel, she found a flurry of calls, texts, and emails. Journalists, legal advisors, and even some disgruntled staff from Hartsfield-Jackson had somehow traced Ebony's name. Many wanted her story, or were hoping she'd corroborate allegations of discrimination. She was reluctant to step into the spotlight this way. She'd never sought publicity for activism, but as Ebony read message after message, she realized her voice might matter. She scheduled a call with her family attorney for advice, deciding to wait until after meeting Johnson. That evening, Ebony arrived at a luxurious rooftop bar in downtown Los Angeles, the designated spot for her meeting with Terence Johnson. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the city lights glittering below. Johnson was seated at a corner table, nursing a glass of bourbon. James Watson stood nearby. "Ebony Johnson," said warmly as she approached. "How was your meeting with the studio?" She smiled, sliding into a seat, productive and promising. "I'll know more by the end of the week, but things look good." Johnson nodded, a satisfied expression on his face. "Excellent, congratulations." He signaled to a waiter to bring Ebony a drink, and she requested a sparkling water, her mind too busy for alcohol. Once the waiter stepped away, Johnson leaned forward. "I'm sure you've seen the news by now. Stories are leaking about staff misconduct, racial bias, and poor management in Terminal A at Hartsfield. My team's concerned. The city wants our investment, but not the backlash," James Watson chimed in. "The public outcry is intensifying. The staffer you mentioned is at the center of multiple passenger complaints. And Ebony, your name came up as someone who experienced her bias. Some media outlets might want to interview you." Ebony glanced between the two men. "Yes, I've been getting calls and messages asking for my story. I haven't responded yet," Smart Johnson said, tapping his glass. "We're weighing options. The city's desperate to modernize Terminal A. If we back out, it'll leave them in a lurch, and the negative press could amplify. But if we move forward, we risk tying ourselves to a scandal if it's not managed properly." Ebony raised an eyebrow. "Where do I fit in?" Johnson took a measured breath. "We want to transform Terminal A into a model of inclusivity and innovation that includes a rebranding campaign, staff training, and a top-to-bottom overhaul of customer experience. My thought Caldwell Creative can handle the entire branding and outreach strategy if you're up for it. You'd be more than just a consultant. You'd be a partner in ownership." Ebony's jaw nearly dropped. This wasn't just about investing a bit of money. This was about stepping into a leadership role to fix the very issues she'd encountered. It felt surreal. That's a huge offer, Ebony managed. "But what about the staffer and the existing culture of discrimination?" James interjected. "We'll clean house if necessary. That staffer is on the edge of termination. Anyway. But Ebony, we need you on the inside to help reshape Terminal A's image. And, to put it bluntly, as a black woman who's experienced the nonsense firsthand, your leadership in this project could be the authenticity we need." Ebony's mind swirled. She thought of the times people told her she was too loud, of how often she'd had to prove herself. Now, ironically, her biggest opportunity might be tied to that very prejudice. She saw the chance to turn the narrative around, be the one who refused to be silenced, who changed the rules of the game. "I'm intrigued," Ebony said at last. eyes blazing with conviction. "I'll want to negotiate terms, but count me in. I won't just slap a brand on it. I want real policy changes, community engagement, staff diversity. The whole 9 yards." Johnson's face lit up. "That's exactly what we want. Let's finalize a plan within the next few weeks. We'll need to coordinate with the airport authority, the city, and of course the airline tenants. But I have a feeling this is going to be big." They toasted with Ebony's sparkling water and Johnson's bourbon. As the sun sank below the horizon, Ebony felt a surge of purpose. I walked into that airport as a passenger, with a dream I left as a potential owner who could shape an entire terminal. The irony wasn't lost on her, and she couldn't help but smile at how life had come full circle. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Ebony juggled finalizing her Hollywood deal, coordinating with Johnson's team, and carefully stepping into the public eye to address the discrimination scandal. She gave a measured statement to a prominent news outlet, highlighting her personal experience, but also her faith in the new direction the terminal could take. Meanwhile, the staffer's name, finally revealed to be Marjorie Tate, surfaced in multiple complaints. The airport authority scrambled to manage PR threats of lawsuits piled up. Marjorie was suspended, pending an investigation. Ebony watched from a distance, a mixture of relief and pity. Despite Marjorie's hateful actions, Ebony knew she was just a symptom of deeper systemic issues. After careful coordination, Ebony flew back to Atlanta for a critical meeting with the airport authority and city officials. She entered the same terminal where she'd been humiliated weeks ago, but this time with a powerful entourage of lawyers, consultants, and Terrence Johnson himself. The tension in the corridor was palpable. In a stark conference room overlooking the tarmac, Ebony made her pitch to the city's aviation committee. She outlined her vision for Terminal A: advanced digital check-ins, integrated social media portals for real-time customer feedback, curated local businesses for dining and retail-improved staff training on inclusivity and community outreach programs. The committee members asked pointed questions, probing Ebony's credentials and her capacity to handle such a massive project. But Ebony never wavered. After what felt like an eternity, the committee gave a unanimous nod for Johnson's consortium and Ebony to proceed with negotiations. The formal signing was scheduled for the following week, but Ebony's day wasn't over. As she left the conference room, a security officer stopped her. "Ms. Caldwell, Ms. Tate requested to speak with you, if you're open to it." Ebony's stomach clenched. Part of her didn't want to see Marjorie ever again, but a deeper part recognized this might be a chance for closure. She followed the officer to a small side office. Inside, Marjorie stood arms crossed. She looked disheveled, her once impeccable hair now slightly messy, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. Ebony hesitated in the doorway. "You wanted to talk to me?" Ebony began softly. Marjorie's eyes flickered with resentment, fear, and something Ebony couldn't quite identify. Maybe desperation. "I lost my job, you know," she said flatly. "All because you had to make a big deal out of nothing." Ebony's anger flared, but she forced herself to stay calm. It wasn't nothing. Your bias and disrespect weren't isolated incidents. "You've hurt many passengers," Marjorie scoffed, looking away. "I was just following instructions. The bigwigs told me to keep order and deal with rowdy passengers. That meant focusing on people who stood out, who might cause issues." Her voice trembled, a strange mixture of bitterness and regret. "My job was on the line too. I did what they told me." Ebony felt a twinge of empathy, though she still bristled at Marjorie's words. "That doesn't excuse your behavior," Ebony said firmly. "But I do believe the system here was broken. You were part of it." Marjorie stared at the floor. Maybe I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. They fired me after the investigation. I've got bills, a mortgage. Ebony took a deep breath. Despite her anger and hurt, she couldn't deny that corporate scapegoating was common. Marjorie might have been a convenient sacrifice for the airport's PR. Still, Ebony refused to shoulder the blame for Marjorie's bigotry. "I hope you find a path forward," Ebony said at last. "But understand, you're responsible for your actions. You nearly cost me my dignity, calling me too loud and insinuating I didn't belong. That's on you." Marjorie's lip quivered. Ebony felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Finally, she turned to leave. "Good luck, Marjorie," she said softly before stepping out. Behind her, she heard Marjorie's quiet sob and the door closed. 6 months later, Terminal A at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, underwent a partial reopening with new branding, upgraded facilities, and a fresh approach to customer service. Huge signs proclaimed, "Welcome to the future of travel." Media swarmed the concourse, capturing the official unveiling ceremony. Among the dignitaries and local politicians stood Terence Johnson, beaming with pride. Next to him, Ebony Caldwell radiated confidence in a sleek business suit, her Caldwell Creative logo pinned on her lapel. The mayor cut a ceremonial ribbon praising the transformation that promised to make Atlanta a leader in global travel experiences. Reporters clamored to interview Ebony. One asked pointedly, "You were once just a passenger who faced discrimination here. Now you're a co-owner of the terminal. How does that feel?" Ebony smiled, her voice resonating without apology. "It feels like justice and a new beginning. My hope is that no one will ever again be made to feel like they don't belong in this airport. We're setting a standard for respect, innovation, and inclusivity." Across the terminal, Ebony noticed a new wave of staff wearing crisp uniforms with bright, welcoming smiles. Some recognized her, nodding in appreciation. Ebony beamed back. This is what real change looks like, she thought. That evening, after the crowds dispersed, Ebony walked through the concourse, soaking in the result of her hard work. She strolled past a bustling cafe, noticing travelers from all walks of life, mingling freely. The overhead screens glowed with vibrant flight information and interactive social media feeds, a Caldwell creative innovation. She stopped near the very security line where her ordeal had started. A sign read, "Your voice matters, real-time feedback." Welcome a QR code, inviting passengers to share their experiences directly. Ebony felt a wave of satisfaction. She had turned a cruel moment, a staffer labeling her too loud into a catalyst for monumental change. She'd proven that silence wasn't the path to progress. Refusing to be silenced was... As she exited the airport, Ebony paused to look back at the terminal. A sign, "I own this place," she thought with a half-smile. But more importantly, she owned her story, and no one would ever steal her voice again. Ebony Caldwell's journey from passenger to partner, from marginalized to magnate, reminds us that every setback can be a stepping stone to triumph. When one bold voice too loud for some refuses to be silenced, real change becomes possible. Through grit, resilience, and a touch of poetic justice, Ebony overcame discrimination and transformed it into an opportunity to uplift others. If you found inspiration, hope, or even a spark of outrage in Ebony's story, we invite you to keep that momentum going. Like this video, if her triumph resonated with you, share it with friends or family who might need a reminder that obstacles can be overcome. And subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate courage, determination, and the power to change the world. Join us as we continue to shine a light on remarkable journeys, because your voice, just like Ebony's, deserves to be heard.